Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Talking with the Red Shoes. We are very happy to welcome today Brooke Pfautz, who is the founder and CEO of Vintory. I'm Simon Lehmann from AJL Consulting. In today's session, we're going to spend quite a bit of time to talk about a very big challenge in our industry, and that is supply. Creating supply for any vacation rental company is always a huge challenge. But before we touch on those topics, we would love to get Brooke to start introducing himself and talk about to the audience why and how did he end up in the vacation rental industry.
Well, thanks, Simon. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been like most people, it's been kind of an interesting journey. You know, coming into the vacation rental space, I was actually in mortgage banking prior to this, so don't ask me how you go from mortgage banking into vacation rentals. But in 2007, I started a company called Vantage Resort Realty down in Ocean City, Maryland. Knew nothing about vacation rentals, but we ended up building a pretty solid company, and we wanted to do something a little bit different, and we wanted to try to really bring, all the amenities you'd find in a high-end, five-star hotel to the vacation rental business. And we were pretty successful. So we grew Vantage to about 500 properties in 5 years. And then I realized I was playing, general manager, and I'm not a good general manager. I'm a better sales and marketing guy. And I really enjoyed the inventory acquisition piece, but I didn't enjoy, managing a team of cleaners and housekeepers and playing general manager. So I sold Vantage in 2013, and I've been in the industry ever since.
Wonderful. I mean, there's a bit more passion in the industry than mortgage banking, right? So let's face it.
And I go to those conferences, Simon, the Mortgage Bankers Association conferences. I mean, look, they were all right, but I mean, they're all tight. Everyone's wearing their suits, and you're walking around, and you're having little cocktail hours and things like that. It was nothing like a VRMA or a VRM Intel conference, that's for sure.
Absolutely, that's why we're all in it to make it a better place as well. I mean, this is interesting that you sort of started really at the nuts and bolts of the business and went into the operational piece and really saw how challenging it was. Looking at that back at that time, Brooke, you built a very successful business, but if you sort of reflect on that, what were the issues and the points that sort of kept you up at night, and where do you think were your biggest challenges in running this property management company?
Well, it was, I'm a big growth guy, right? I mean, I had very kind of high goals, growth goals. And, every year, I thought we were doing pretty well, 500 properties in 5 years, but I had a business partner that pushed me pretty well too. And as soon as I started getting cocky and confident, I go to these conferences and tell people how many properties I had. I'd come home and he's like, I don't care, keep growing, kind of thing. So he kept me humble, but the challenges I had is, scaling a business that quickly and learning it on the fly, not knowing anything, what we're doing. It was really just, making sure we were bringing on the right inventory. The other challenges I had were, just bringing on inventory that maybe we didn't do a good enough job in vetting the amenities that were in the property, making sure that it had everything. Because you can onboard all these properties, but if you don't have that tight checklist on making sure that you've got the right pots and pans and the couches are in good condition and the carpet has been cleaned and everything else, all you're doing is you're pushing, mistakes and unhappy customers, towards the summer season. Because we were in Ocean City, Maryland, where, we had we're a 10-week season realistically. So it was pretty challenging to do that. So those were the biggest things that kind of kept me up at night, was just the operational issues. And again, I'm the first to admit, I'm not an ops guy. I'm more of a sales and marketing and
absolutely. But I mean, you mentioned the numbers of properties and your business partner and about scale. What are the restricting factors with your experience when it comes to scale? I mean, we will talk a bit further about, what has recently happened in the industry, but this scale issue, always seems to come back over and over again. And now with COVID, it has pivoted, and also to a point that we at AJL Consulting are very strong about, is we don't talk about scale, we talk about profitability. How does that, how is that balanced in that sense? You wanted to grow, but also profitability is equally important. And how do you grow your inventory in keeping that particular issue in your focus at the same time?
Well, that's a great question. And, most companies do not have a systematic plan to go out there and go and get inventory, right? What they do is they send out one postcard a year. They occasionally get, people that fill in their lead form on their page that they just find organically. But nobody has a systematic plan, and very few companies even have full-time business development people. It's usually the owner plays business development role, or it's the GM who is doing 100 other things. And this is one of those things that's in the Eisenhower matrix, right? It's important, but not urgent. So what ends up happening is it doesn't get done. And sending out one postcard a year is not a strategic approach to go grow your inventory. The companies that actually look at it as the profit that it really is, and have that systematic plan, and have that, continue looking at it. It blows my mind that most companies do not look at owner acquisition or inventory acquisition like they look at guests. And if you think about, if you add one or two properties, if you look at the net, what that adds to the bottom line year after year after year, you can move the needle a lot quicker by adding more inventory. And then, shameless plug to you here, if you can then make sure that it's the right inventory, right, and it's profitable inventory, by adding in your services, it definitely will, it's a more strategic approach, and make sure you're bringing in the right inventory.
Absolutely. And that's what you wanted to address with Vintory, I guess. And we will get into that in a second. But interesting enough, on the other side is that when people say, what's my biggest pain point, is actually dealing with owners, right? Next to the operational challenges that you have. And then all of a sudden people had this wonderful idea to go into master lease where you can get rid of the owners and deal with other challenges. And I guess we know what the result of that was. So basically we're coming back to the original game of vacation rental, which is back again with individual homeowners. And one of the things that we are very strong about in our view at AJL Consulting is that this business will remain hyper-local, fragmented, and it will also remain in private ownership when it comes to the assets. So, inventory at large, even in the future, will be owned by individuals who rent out their secondary homes, and even primary, but mostly secondary homes, to pay mortgages and pay the investment. And so I guess you would fundamentally agree with me that inventory also for the future will not at large become institutional.
I think it's coming. I just don't know at what scale. You know what I mean? Is it, I think there will be institutional funding that comes in. You'll see hedge funds or private equity that maybe buy some homes and scale. But again, what is it going to be? Are we talking 1%, 2% of the overall market? I don't think it's going to move the needle. I mean, there are already funds out there and high net worth individuals that do own a lot of inventory. But I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where it's 10% or 20% of the market is going to be owned by hedge funds and private equity at all, or REITs.
All right. So basically the challenge of growing inventory is remaining at large. Also dealing with individual owners and finding them. I remember at Interhome, at the times when we were on Interhome, how we could get to owners, in destination, running around, putting flyers on people's windscreens, going to builders fairs in London who owned a lot of assets in Spain that we could try to address if they wanted to rent out. But, I remember back those days when we ran Interhome at a large scale, growing supply was the single biggest challenge, and also cost, by the way. I mean, the amount of money we spend on contractors in the market to find homeowners, and sometimes we spend 2-3 years on one homeowner until he converted to become a customer of ours. And so in that context, I was always a huge, let's say, fan and interested person in what Vintory is doing, and sort of helping to ease that point. So tell the audience, what is Vintory all about, and what are you trying to solve with your technology and business?
Yeah, well, so Vintory, think of it as one part technology and it's one part sales and marketing agency wrapped together. So think of us as, we have this cloud-based software tool. Think of it as like a Salesforce with all the marketing bells and whistles, right? And then you plug in our team. We've got about 28 individuals on our team that do nothing. I mean, the only thing we do is we help vacation rental managers grow their inventory. So, that team then helps and coaches, our partners to help them grow inventory. And again, we are the best in the world at doing this. We are the only company that I know of that's actually going out there and doing this. And we specialize in one thing. And, my father always said there's riches and niches, and this is our niche. And we are, this is all we do. This is all we spend our focus on. So again, it starts with technology. We onboard the technology. It's a CRM that has like email automation, texting capabilities, SMS. It has even voicemail drops. It's a good place to keep all your leads, and you can create funnels. We can create landing pages through that. We track every single call that comes in. We're tracking every single person that's actually going to the website, and we're nurturing those leads through the process. We can talk about later kind of that omni-channel marketing approach on how we get the.
So I could be very critical or cynical now, Brooke, and say you penetrate the owner until he cracks. Is that what you do?
That's a good way to look at it. Yes, but here's the thing, most. So if you think about it, most owners, maybe out of let's say you're going after 1,000 owners that are in your database that you're really going after. You may only have about 10% of them or 100 that are actually in that buying phase, right? There are different stages of their life cycle, the customer journey. And our job at Vintory is to move those owners along, right? Take them from that initial awareness stage and move them down the pipeline. And it was just
being warm to convert, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But you need to do it in a systematic approach. Sending one postcard a year is not a systematic approach. And it blows my mind, Simon, that people do not understand the true value of a property. I think you recognized it when, at your previous tenure. I mean, if you think about a property, and here's a quick, just general rule of thumb. If whatever the gross booking revenue on average, looking at the averages of the averages of the averages, and I've asked these questions over 100 times.
On destination, on type of property, whatever, yeah.
Yeah, the average property, whatever the gross booking revenue is, that is what the lifetime value will be for you as a property management or a professional vacation rental management company. And I'll walk you through the math of that. So if you have a property that's doing $50,000 in gross booking revenue, so that's just owner rent, if you will, before all the taxes and fees and things like that. I've asked again this question well over 100 times. The average margins usually ends up being about 10% is what usually falls to the bottom line. And I'm sure you have a lot of data that probably confirms that. So your first year margins are $5,000, right? And then what you need to calculate is what is your lifetime in years? And there's a very simple. I took this from my SaaS days, at LiveRes. To calculate your lifetime in years, you just take 1 divided by your annual churn as a percentage. So for those who don't know, churn is what percentage of your inventory do you lose every year? And on average, it's 10%. So if you take 1 divided by 10%, it equals 10. So you take that 5,000 that you made in year 1, multiply it times the lifetime in years, 10, and that gives you your 50,000. So again, the average gross margins is usually that net profit that falls to the bottom line is usually 10%. And what we found is the average churn is about 10%. So whatever that gross booking revenue is, that's your lifetime value. Now think about that. You work your butt off to get 1 or 2 extra reservations, to get a couple $100. When if you just added 1 property, you just added $50,000 in net profits to your property. Plus, we're missing one critical part. They could hire a company like you to help them sell their company, and they get a value for every one of those properties, right? So what is a property worth that's doing $50,000 in gross booking revenue that has $5,000 in margins?
Depends on the length of contract that they have.
But if you could look at your historical churn and things like that, you can probably come up with a good number. But you're going to get a nice number. So my point is, you're getting $50,000 in margins over the life of the property. Plus, you're getting an exit valuation. Every one of those contracts has a value, when you go to sell the business. So again, it blows my mind that people don't really recognize, and maybe a lot of people do, you know what I mean? But most vacation rental managers I've talked to, they don't actually understand the true value of a property. So if you can end up getting, 10 properties, if you hire somebody, or if you bring on, if you're able to get 10 extra properties this year, at 5,000, that's $50,000 in margins year 1. And again, multiply that times 10 years, you got 500 grand in net margins just by bringing on an extra 10 properties. I mean, that's a nice ROI. I don't think there's a better ROI out there.
Absolutely not. And I have a million of questions for you because I find the topic so fascinating. and we need to first of all be mindful of time, and secondly, make sure we can focus on the relevant issue. But for the first question I have is, what are, in your experience with Vintory, what is the biggest pain point, if you wish, to convert a homeowner? And obviously you're not going to talk about your holy grail, so I won't even ask that question, and where is your sources coming from, so we won't go there. But in terms of having 100 leads, we always made calculations also at other property management companies, how many, let's say, interested leads you need in order to convert, let's say, 5% of your leads into actually becoming homeowners who will work with you. So the question to you is, what is the biggest challenge to convert a homeowner? And secondly, how flexible do you need to be on the contracting? Because one thing that is being debated across the big boys, especially in Europe, like Aways and Atelier, Oyo, Sykes, and Interhome and Intershell, and all these guys who are always in the business with exclusive contracts, 1 or 2 year exclusive contracts, and it's shifting in terms of the contracting model with homeowners, and say, hey, we give you more flexibility. So can you tell us what is the owner's single biggest challenge or pain point to actually convert in becoming a managed property?
Just so I'm clear, is this the property owner, or is this the owner, vacation rental management owner? They're paying.
No, it's the property, the person who owns the property, who needs to go give it to management.
What are their pain points? So yeah, I mean,
why do they not rent?
Why do they not rent? Well, let me answer that question by saying, so we do ask this question in our onboarding process. We always ask our partners, our vacation rental managers, what are the biggest pain points that they hear from the property owners? And the reason there's a very strategic way we do that. The reason we do that, because what we then do is we say, okay, how do you solve those pain points? Because that's the messaging that you want to get out. And we flush that out in our key messaging report. And then that becomes the baseline in all the marketing that we do. So whether it's landing pages, whether it's postcards, whether it's marketing brochures and everything else, it's critical to kind of reverse engineer it based on those pain points. And we actually, we create personas. So there may be first time Frank as a persona. There might be, competitor Carla, and those kind of things. So
works with somebody else, and yeah.
So we build the pain points on there. But here are the kind of the consistent ones we hear. It always starts with cleaning and maintenance, right? The property isn't being upkept. It comes down to revenue, not making enough money, and then communication is a big one. Like we hear time and time again, it just comes down to communication. They're being left in the dark. So what we try to do is, when we're flushing out their USPs, their unique selling propositions, we reverse engineer it based on those pain points. And like, okay, Simon, how do you solve this pain point for these personas out there that lack of communication? Oh, well, we have an owner portal. We have email newsletters we send out every quarter. We do this, blah, blah, blah. And here's the thing: many management companies have those things already in place, but they're not communicating it to the prospects. So if you can flush out what that looks like and what those USPs are, those key features and benefits that you have that solve those pain points, and you get it out there, you're going to be ahead of the game. And I mean, if you look at a lot of property management companies, I mean, if they even have a property management page that's well done, they're not really highlighting kind of what sets them apart.
Absolutely, that makes a ton of sense. Now, on the other side as well, Brooke, in terms of acquisition costs. So now let's talk about the property manager. And we at AJL, we do a lot of M&As. We look at financial data a lot, either on the sell side and the buy side. And especially on the buy side, when we're looking at an asset with X amount of thousands of properties, one of our pretty much first question is, what is your average customer property acquisition cost? And in terms of marketing and sales, if it's a reasonably sophisticated PM, they know what their customer acquisition costs are. Not on full costs, unfortunately, just looking at distribution and OTA commission, but that's a start, right? Mm-hmm. But when we're looking at property acquisition costs and say, okay, what is your net churn? What is your gross churn? And what is your true property acquisition cost per contract? So understanding what is customer lifetime value or owner lifetime value. What is your
with like they're deer in headlights, right?
Hey, I tell you, we sometimes it's impossible to get that question answered at all. How do you see that you have similar experiences, and what can we do as an industry, and how can we help PMs to evaluate? I mean, obviously for you, this is day-to-day work because you need to convince them that you can bring their property acquisition costs down, but how do you evaluate property acquisition costs?
Well, that's great. It's actually very apropos right now. I'm actually putting together a slide deck for Amy's revenue management conference, and it's based all around.
Are we competing? I want to speak there too.
No. We're going to be complementing each other, but it's going to be
okay.
All around inventory acquisition, inventory metrics, right? And it talks about those major metrics. So it's obviously the margins. It's the LTV to CAC ratio. So that's your lifetime value to your cost to acquire a new customer. We talk about your months to recover, your CAC, your customer acquisition costs, and we talk about all these expenses. So that's, again, one of the services we do is really just kind of bringing that to light for our partners. So what we'll do is we actually have this, it's a spreadsheet that's probably about, it's not as in-depth as yours. I've seen your spreadsheet that you build out, the pricing, platform, but it's pretty complicated. And what it does though is it takes, all your acquisition costs through all the different sources. And again, with inventory acquisition, it's not about just one source. There's no one silver bullet. You have to look at it. And I think somebody said this yesterday. It's a wheel, right? And there's a bunch of spokes, and each one of those marketing sources is a different spoke. And you need, whether it be, email, whether it be referrals to realtors, whether it be direct mail, PPC, retargeting, all the IP targeting, all those different, channels. It's just one thing. So what we do is we build this out, and it gives us all the key metrics. And we actually will plan out, when we sit down with our partners, we actually plan out, all right, how many properties do you have today? What is your goal? And then what is your churn? And then we say, okay, based on that, and then based on the TAM, the total addressable market, here's what we found. This is what you need to do. And to hit your goal.
Are you helping them to identify the TAM, and what sources do you use to identify?
So we go through, we have a full data team. I mean, we've got two full-time data analysts on our team. I mean, that is probably one of the most critical pieces is the data. And this is where in the US is much better than in Europe. We really struggle. There's challenges obviously with getting data in Europe and the Caribbean and Canada and Mexico, but US is fantastic for data. We've got it from multiple different sources, whether it be, you're getting it straight from the county, you're getting it, we have a full OTA scrape of all the OTAs, 2.2 million records from there. You can get vacation rental permit data. And anything you can't get there, you can usually get through a list broker. So that's kind of the starting point, is that baseline and getting the data. So, but what we'll do is we'll plan out their year, right? So, okay, this is your goal. This is how much, you currently have. This is what you're going to churn. This is the TAM. This is what you need to do to get this. And based on the assumptions we've seen for the 50 plus some other companies we've done this for, these are going to be your assumptions. It's two major assumptions, right? It's response rate and then it's conversion. And once you have those two numbers, you can kind of backfill and know exactly what you'll end up having. Now, some of those may fluctuate based on how good of a salesperson do they have, right? But for all in all, you can kind of predict pretty closely where it's going to be. So you build that out and you say, okay, this is what it looks like. Once you have that, then you can do is say, okay, if our average gross booking revenue is this, we talked about the margins and we talked about how that multiplies. And then what you do is the spreadsheet we build out. I'm glad to go over this with anybody free of charge, just kind of play it out. It'll give you all those key metrics, right? And again, those key metrics are, you're going to look at your lifetime value. We're going to look at your CAC, your cost to acquire a new customer. A great ratio is your LTV to CAC ratio is a great metrics to look at. And we can kind of tell you where you would, rank against your peers. One of my favorite ones is months to recover, right? So if you think of, and what that means is if my acquisition cost is $100 or $1,000, and I'm making $100 per month, you know what I mean? It's going to take me 10 months to recover my CAC. Anything typically less than 12 months, if you can get a CAC recovery in less than 12 months, you've hit the holy grail. Like, that is fantastic. As long as your churn is relatively normal. If you've got, of course, 50% churn, then you got a whole world of hurt and you're in trouble. So
you have other problems, right? Excellent. I mean, to be honest, this sounds too good to be true. And yes, you will have some bigger pain points in Europe, especially to get data. That has been one of the biggest challenges that I had in my role at the time, to actually get quantitative data that you can actually do something on, and which was super interesting, difficult. Actually get hold of owner data is extremely challenging in Europe. because, you know, a lot of Central Europeans and Northern Europeans own assets in the Southern European place. They're there 2 weeks a year. The chance that you meet them at the time when they're there is pretty much zero.
That's why you're putting flyers under their windshield wipers, right?
Exactly. And the chance that it's getting read is about 1 in a million. So that's also the challenge. So obviously local presence helped us, having local offices and trying to engage with people when they came in off seasons. They walked the shops and saw what their opportunities were to rent places. But it's a very tough process. But I mean, it sounds like incredible. And I'm sure that Vacasa is one of your largest customers to start with, because, you know, I want to use the remainder of the time to have a bit of a yarn with you about the industry, and scale is obviously the topic, right? So prior to COVID, it was a strong buyer market with Oyo in the space, with, you know, Sykes cottages being sold for $500 million to Vitruvian Capital by Platinum Equity, spending 1.3 billion for Aways, Vacasa raising tons of capital. And the world is looking different now, and building scale has been the game, right? And I remember I was at the large Booking.com conference last year in Amsterdam, which was great. And I was approached by Maninder, who is the co-founder of Oyo and chief strategy officer. And his first question was, how do I scale supply? And how do I get a hold of these owners? And it's not that easy. So, and then the second answer to that is just make acquisitions. But then your churn is going through the flipping roof and you destroy value like crazy. How do you view that, and maybe your view on the US market when it comes to, you know, you remember the past few conferences, we spent a lot of time talking about consolidation. We talked a lot about capital flowing into this industry, and therefore it became a seller's market because you got good multiples. The companies were paying good money. Turnkey was making quite a lot of acquisitions as well. And all of a sudden it's become very quiet. What's going on, and how you view the US market?
Well, I mean, obviously, Vacasa was being very aggressive in going out there and buying companies. Obviously, post-COVID, I think they've slowed down a little bit, to say the least. I think they are still going to go out there, but I may actually take a contrarian point here on this for some of my colleagues, but I think COVID actually may end up helping Vacasa. I think, you know, they were, and again, I don't have any inside information, but this is just kind of my gut.
Sure.
They were growing, you know, at hyper growth. You know what I mean? They were scaling as fast as they could. I'm sure they were a little sloppy. I'm sure there was a lot of cost creep going on when you're growing that quickly. And I think kind of the reset, as Matt Landau calls it, you know what I mean? I think it forced them. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but it sounds like it was like they furloughed or laid off 90% of their team. Now they've since brought back a big portion of those, but you know what? They didn't bring a lot of people back on. So I think that COVID forced them to reset.
Have a speed diet.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's a fasting, right? You know what I mean? Like put you on an island and don't feed you. And that's exactly what happened to them. But yeah, they were obviously able to raise that, what was it, $104 million round or something like that. But look, you know, my understanding is they weren't making money pre-COVID, you know, before, you know what I mean? Because it was all about growth. And you know, now I think again, now there's going to be some blips on the map here, that's for sure, because, you know, I've heard, you know, numerous stories about how owners were trying to get a hold of their reps, and the reps were, you know, nowhere to be found, and the phone would just ring and ring.
Which is a dangerous situation as well when you're not.
So who knows what the churn is going to be 3 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, you know, 3 months from now, when those contracts maybe come up for renewal, or the season is over. I think you may see a lot of those owners churn. So I think they're definitely going to have my gut tells me again, they'll have some kind of a blip in the future here, but I think in the long run, it actually may benefit them. Who knows, we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition, while Oyo is retrieving entirely from the market, obviously takes out a bit of pressure as well by somebody who was formerly super well financed by SoftBank and had a super aggressive growth strategy. It's also like globally, but also in the United States. It's probably easing some of the pressure while still trying to digest the Wyndham acquisition under the belt is obviously adding some additional challenges that are going to happen in the market. But in terms of supply, this remains, as we said at the beginning or before, we still believe that inventory at large is going to be in secondary home ownership by private people. We do not believe that institutional inventory will reach anything close to 10% ever in our industry. So we do remain with a super fragmented market. We still remain with the fact that this business is built on trust. This business is built on relationships, and it will remain hyper local. And I think we see that within COVID, that business has gone even more hyper local than ever before, because that's where the action is happening, and that's where the relationship to owners is built and maintained. And as we said, institutional ownership is not going to be a piece at large. So actually, does that mean when it comes to growth and consolidation that we're actually going back a few years' time, and actually the fragmentation will start again? I mean, that would be great news for Vintory, right?
Yeah, and just kind of answer your question, or maybe it wasn't even a question before, but no, Vacasa is not a client of ours. They're not partners. But what I think we do actually is we level the playing field for the smaller mom and pop shop, so they can go head to head. So we bring all the tools, if not more, and resources of the the turnkeys and the Vacasas and all these large venture-backed companies. We bring all those tools to the average Joe. And they can go head to head against those big companies, and not only go head to head against them, but actually, win. So, but to go back to more of your question, as far as, are we going to go backwards a little bit here? I think we'll go backwards, but then we'll leapfrog forward. And you and I have a common friend, Steve Schwab at Casago, and he's going more towards this franchise model. And I believe that's the future for this. And, you get the best of both worlds. If you look at the real estate industry, all the big successful real estate companies are all franchises, and they bring in that the processes and the systems, and they can bring in additional help, that whether it be software and all these different things, but it still has that local feel. You still have that local owner of the franchise. They own that franchise, and then but they're going to be committed to the market, and to the community and everything else. I think that when we have consolidation, or if you call that even consolidation, the kind of that, it's going to be on more of that franchise model. And then there's also, there's other companies out there doing as well. There's, Brandon Ezra at Grand Welcome, and obviously iTrip,
Skyrun, and you name it. Yep. Unfortunately, we totally agree. I would have loved to have it. I would have loved to have a debate with you, Brooke, on this one, but no, we totally agree. I mean, one thing we have a large customer working with in Australia right now, and we came up with this consulting conversation, and one of the founders is actually a former, or still is a former real estate consultant with one of the world's largest real estate franchise. And actually, there's a debate about this too. The more and more it becomes individual and people's business, the harder it is to maintain franchise standards. So there are buts about it, right? In terms of how you can grow and how you can scale. And is this the answer? But, I have been thinking about consolidation of this industry for the last 15 years since I've been in it, and trying to grow a super large business, and scale was always stopped eventually because there's certain restrictions on scaling your business. And we have now seen so many different models in the recent years, being it by raising a ton of capital, and try to grow through acquisitions or whatever. And I also do believe that franchise is definitely a great answer. It is not fine-tuned yet. It's not finalized yet. What it is it the differentiation over technology? Is it differentiation over creating enough demand, or being able to help a guy who starts with actually building supply? Because that's what I would love to see as a franchisee. If I take a franchise, I need to have confidence that I can build enough supply to build a meaningful business.
Well, if you don't have that, sorry to interrupt, but if you don't have that, you don't have a business, right? You know what I mean? So the supply is the most critical part. So a shameless plug for me, every one of these franchise companies needs to plug in Vintory in our property acquisition system to help them grow, to ensure their success. So shameless plug.
Wonderful. Sorry. No, absolutely. And this is exactly the point. So supply does remain the single biggest challenge in our industry. And I think with Vintory, with also AJL Consulting is very happy to work with, I do believe that there's an alternative to help you grow in this sector, and actually truly understand what your property acquisition costs are, to make mindful decisions within the growth of your business and being profitable at the end of the day. And I think we all understood, especially during and now, I'm even scared to say post-COVID because we're far away from post, but we're right in the middle of it. But I think it's become very clear to everyone that while we're growing, we also need to have sustainability and profitability. Profitability equals oxygen, and we all need oxygen for survival. And I'm really excited that we've been able to bring also a company like Vintory out there to our audience to see, hey, there is ways and how you can do it professionally, controlled, knowing your acquisition costs, being very specific about the personas you're trying to address in terms of your ownership. I think I would like to have a last sort of final question, also related back on my history. Growing supply is actually a piece of cake. I'm just being now the devil's advocate, because at the end of the day, you might end up with a ton of shit, but it's inventory, right? And this is a big debate that we always had as well. When we started to filter out the quality type of inventory, and we all know a lower quality property creates less gross margin and contribution because you have more complaints, you have this and that, you have less occupancy, whatever. But the guys who brought the inventory in, he said it's one more property. So, they brought in 1-star, 2-star stuff that you might rent for a week or two a year. They say it's incremental revenue. How do you deal with that? I mean, because at the end of the day, you can now turn around to me and say, oh, my customer wants to have sort of higher end properties, but then everybody wants to have that. So we all understand that lower end properties is easier to get and to contract because the owners are desperate. They want to make some cash. But on the other hand, it's hard to rent because it's lower quality, creates headaches. How do you balance that when a customer comes to you and say, hey, I want Vintory to work for me, and please only get me 5-star properties at 200,000 revenues a year and everything else I don't want to have? How do you deal with that?
Well, you have that conversation with them and you understand exactly what are their goals. And if that's the case, if they only want a property that's doing 200,000 or greater, then you just know, look, there's only a handful of them out there. What is the likelihood of us getting them? And we can do that, and make a strategic approach. But you have to, again, have the strategic plan to do this on a long tail and looking at this, and long into the future. But I mean, this is where honestly, where you all come in pretty, great here, with everything you guys are doing with your pricing tool and understanding the true profitability by property, right? And, I've seen your spreadsheets and your algorithms and everything else, and truly understanding how much money are you making on a property, and at what point are you losing money and you're actually going backwards by bringing on those properties. So, this is a good time to really truly look at the inventory and the profit margin by property and understand what that looks like. And you can build that into the formulas and build that into your strategic plan and understand, hey, yes, the number of units may not go up, but in the end, our gross margins are going to go up. So we have a great partner down in 30A, John Kelly Rich, with 30A Vacay, and they say, we never want to be more than 100 properties. So every year they say, Brooke, see these top 10 properties that we have here in the band, get us those, and we're going to get rid of our bottom 10. And we've done the modeling over the next 3 years. Their revenues are going to just about double. Their margins are going to just about triple, because that's where all their margins are coming from, and they're going to have still a great business. And they're not going to work. They still have 100 properties, but their top line went up, their net revenue went up, and then their profit went up considerably too. So I'd love to see what it looks like in the end, but the hypothesis is that it's going to be very profitable for them. And I'm sure if they plugged all their numbers into your formula, it would really show exactly what what the net result looks like.
Well, amazing. Brooke, I cannot thank you enough for talking with the Red Shoes. We really enjoyed the conversation. This is an amazing story, and I think you're solving one of the single biggest pain point in our industry in terms of growing supply and providing profitable business. And it's definitely something to check out and learn more about. Thank you for sharing your story to our audience and be with us today. We're looking forward to continue working with you guys. And yes, I mean, I wish you only best success. Stay healthy also to your team, and looking forward to connecting very soon, probably at Vera Mintel's conference, which we're looking forward to speaking as well. So thank you for being with us today, and stay well.
Well, thank you, Simon. I really appreciate it. And if anybody wants that spreadsheet that I talked about, the ROI calculator and marketing calendar, just email me at hello@vintory.com, and I'm glad to send it off to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Simon.